This program is brought to you by the friends and partners of Elijah's Path to Healing Foundation.
You excited to see Grace?
There's rarely a day you won't find these two here.
Hi, baby.
Tracy and Elijah Boone love horses.
Horses can understand your emotions. They respond to it.
But their connection with the animals didn't begin in a barn.
All I remember is a lot of hospital visits.
It began 7 years ago.
Just coming in and out of hospital rooms.
With a goodbye.
Back in 2012, we lost our fairy tale. We lost our happily ever after when my husband, Reed Boone, died of a horrible brain disease.
It happened suddenly, 2 days before Christmas. Elijah was 6 years old.
Pain, sadness, anger, fear. All of the bad feelings and none of the good.
In their time of grief, support and resources were difficult to find.
The hospice therapist handed me a stack of brochures. I looked at the brochures, and after everything that we had been through, I'm looking at my 6-year-old son, and I couldn't picture him in an office right out of the gate. I just couldn't picture it. But I looked through the brochures, and I fumbled on a man and a horse on the brochure, and went, I can picture him with a horse.
Fast forward almost 7 years and hundreds of trips to the barn.
When I actually fell asleep on top of a horse while riding it, that's what their heartbeat does to you. It calms you down so much.
Tracy and Elijah's path to healing has been forged by resilience and horses.
Yeah, good boy.
And they're bringing that healing to others through their nonprofit, Elijah's Path to Healing Foundation.
So that's what this is all about, helping people get through some tough times.
For next,
With this gorgeous, gorgeous animal.
I'm Lori Lizarraga.
Hi, welcome to the Path to Healing Show. This is Tracy with my son Elijah Boone. We have an amazing guest here today. His name is Michael Dawson, and we are so pleased to say that we're out at Trinity Pines Ranch. It's John, Shelly O'Connor's, and Kaylee Limrey's ranch. They are doing amazing work. They are facilitators using equine-assisted philosophy, and you get to see these beautiful horses. I mean, is this the most perfect backdrop or what? So they have a beautiful ranch here in Elizabeth, Colorado. But Michael Dawson is here today, and he is an expert in this work. He is actually the gentleman that was on the, yes, thank you. He was actually the gentleman that was on the brochure that you saw on the 9 News feed. And he was the guy that introduced us and helped us right out of the gate when we lost my husband. So we are extremely excited to have him here. He's a wealth of information. And if you're going through a really hard time right now, stay tuned, because I tell you what, he is going to give you some words of wisdom to go by. And you have a segment that you just finished, and he did what? He gave you some words of wisdom. Was that pretty amazing?
It was amazing. It was awesome, and
he's incredible, isn't he?
Yeah.
He's just a very, very special.
And I have to tell you, he speaks perfectly into the mic.
Yeah, but that's always good. But he's a very special gentleman, and we're really looking forward to you meeting him and us introducing him to the world, because united, we can all make a difference. In 2012, we felt like we lost our happily ever after when my husband
and my dad died of a brain disease 2 days before Christmas. I was only 6 years old.
There have been a lot of twists and turns on our path to healing. Now we are on a quest to help others like you get on your own path to healing and teach everyone who watches how to do James 1:27, that God calls pure religion in His sight, which is to care for the widows and fatherless in their times of distress. I want you to tell them a little bit about you and your experience, but also how grief is a process. This is not something, the people in the world want to overnight change you, or overnight they want you to be done with this thing, or they want to make sure that you're okay, but they also want to make you hurry up and get through this. Can you speak to that a little bit?
I can, and I can speak to how I came by that understanding. I spent some time working as a hospital chaplain in a program called clinical pastoral education 20-something years ago. And my mentor there was a guy named Dr. Larry Houston, who was a Seventh-day Adventist pastor, who was writing a book about grief. And I remember I was so touched by meeting this need that I went into this office one day and I was like, where does a person learn more about this? And all he did was smile. I said, you knew I was coming, didn't you? You know, it's like he could see that it was stirring in me. But he had so many wonderful things that were worth remembering, and one of the most important ones is grief is a process. It's not an event. Grief is a process. It's not an event. It's going to improve. The way you respond to it is going to get better. But there's always a little bit of it with you for the rest of your life.
Yes.
That never goes away.
It doesn't. It just, you learn how to live in your new reality is kind of how I see it.
Right.
You don't get over it. It's just it's a piece of you. That's a really great way.
Sure.
Do children grieve differently than adults?
Yes and no. I think the basic needs of anyone in the process of grief are pretty much the same, whether they're children or adults. But children have less experience in the world, so the things that they will call upon, try to address it will be different than an adult. That actually serves the children better, I believe. It's been my experience, because children don't have any assumptions about it, whereas adults, they've got all this learned information, learned behavior, things that coping skills that may or may not be good, that are ingrained in them after many years of doing whatever they do. And children don't have those things, and they're also very honest about wanting to learn about it and understand what is happening to me, and why is this going on, what is happening to my mom or my dad.
I think that's the hardest part, is they're trying to find out, how do I help my mom more than anything be the person that I remember her being, right?
That's absolutely true. It's parents have to be really careful that the child's experience is not that they lose the parent that they had, because you become like the most important person in the world now once that other parent is gone. And parents feel the responsibility, but it is not something to shrink back from. It's something to lean into, because if you lean into it, you can just more easily find a place just to be there, accepting what's happening with the child, accepting what's happening with you, being honest with them about it, and then kind of talking about it as you're swapping notes, so to speak, as you're learning, as you're going through it together. It's priceless.
That's awesome. Do you have any advice that you'd like to share to the parents out there, to the widows, and how to kind of approach their children? Is there anything that it's on your forefront of your mind right now that you'd like to?
Yeah, what you said earlier about me. Absolutely, your words are perfect. It's important not to over-function, I guess, in terms of what you believe you're trying to do for your child, what you believe will help them, and that kind of thing. Just be yourself. Let yourself be yourself. Let your child be honest with your child. Sometimes parents are very afraid of having to answer a question that their child will ask that they're not ready for. They're like, I don't know how to answer that. And we teach parents more than anything, you don't have to answer it. What you have to do is find out why they asked that question. What is it that they're interested in, that you can learn from them about how they see the experience that they're in.
Right.
Yeah, just turn it around. It's really easy. Why are you asking that question right now? What is it that you want to know?
What's making you curious?
And you'll find out at what level, they really need that information, and helps you figure out what information you can share.
That's really good. The one thing that I think, I remember you saying something to me about education, and I was really worried about Elijah and how well he was doing in school. And you've worked a lot with schools, and this is a big thing on your heart about educating educators. And actually, I would love to bring Shelly in, who owns this ranch. She is a former teacher, and we're going to go ahead and bring her in next.
Awesome.
We're going to have a conversation about all of this.
Great. That'll be good.
Great. Hi, and we're back, and we have another guest, a really good friend of mine. This is Shelly O'Connor, one of the owners of this beautiful ranch, Trinity Pines Ranch, and we have brought her in because she is, I'm going to let you tell your story on who are you. You are an educator. Go ahead and...
Yes, so I am an educator, elementary. So 17 years in the classroom. Most of it was in South Dakota. And then once I came here to Colorado, I decided I wanted to do something a little different than being in the classroom. So I started my own private tutoring business. So I've been doing private tutoring then for the last 5 years.
Okay. So, Michael, I came to you about education and my son, he was having a very tough time in school, as you can imagine. Why do you think that is? Why is grief, when you're dealing with grief and you're trying to have your son drop him off at school and you know, he's having a hard time concentrating, does that have a part in it?
Absolutely. I mean, that's one of the most common symptoms of a grieving child. Any kind of trauma actually is your brain's kind of foggy. You really can't focus like you could at other times, and it's really hard to stay on task. And understandably, why would you even want to, considering the fact that you've had a parent die?
Well, and I remember Elijah always wanting to be with me and making sure that I'm okay. And
right.
The last thing he wanted to do was be somewhere I wasn't.
Right. That too.
So, can I ask you, Shelly, did they, in your education, did they do any training on how to deal with a grieving child?
No, no. I graduated from college in 1995, and there was absolutely no training. I don't even think it was mentioned as something that maybe we needed to address. So yes, nothing.
And if you go to
we had something to say about it.
And if you go to the school counselor, most counselors don't have grief training either.
Right, which we
you would think that they would, but they're just now beginning to incorporate grief studies or grief education into counseling curriculums for master's level counselors.
Now, this is something that's very dear to your heart, if I remember.
Absolutely is.
Yes. And you've worked with some school systems here in Denver?
Oh yeah, I worked with just about every school system in the metropolitan area. It began when I was at Judy's House.
Explain what Judy's House is.
Judy's House for Grieving Children and Families. It's a nonprofit organization that was started by an ex-football player named Brian Greasy while he was here playing for the Broncos, as you may remember. He's a great guy, and it's a great program, and I was really honored to work for them for 3 years and directed that program for part of that time. And it did get me connected to every school district in the area. And after I left Judy's House, another colleague and I were asked to start a program for the Douglas County schools called the Starfish Program that I worked in for 6 or 7 years afterwards.
Incredible work with this. Well,
and that's where we actually got a chance to educate the educators about grief.
Well, and in our experience with Elijah and myself, in third grade, I literally had to pull him out and homeschool him because they just were not equipped. And he was getting farther and farther behind, more and more distraught in everything that he was doing. And, you talk to teachers and they just, they deal with so much already. What can be done, Michael?
What can teachers do?
Or give them some advice. But if you're a principal watching this show right now, for your educators?
And I loved, and we, over the years, we actually did train some administrators, and I wanted the room full of administrators anytime we did a training, because they're the ones that could make the decisions that would help the children the most. But we tried to help teachers, and Shelly should probably speak to this too, but we tried to help teachers understand that a little bit goes a long way. You don't really have to solve the problem. If you can just be present to that problem and acknowledge it and support the child, however the child needs at that moment, you've done more than most other people are doing, because everybody is trying to tell them that it's okay. Tell them not to think about it, not to worry about it, and those kinds of things that people believe are comforting, that children just are like, yeah, that's not so true, Right. And so, but what can you do?
What could a teacher say to a child?
Ask them how they're doing. It sounds too simple, doesn't it? But I'll never forget a training that we did where a teacher was like, I don't know that I can do that. I don't know that I can just ask this child how they're doing and not know where it's going, and I'm afraid I'll get in too deep. And we challenged her. Said, try it. Yeah. And there just happened to be a break between these training days. And she came back and she said, it happened. I saw him in the hall and I just stopped and said, how you been doing since your dad died? And this child's countenance just changed and they smiled and they just started talking to me. And I knew I'd done something that I'd never done before, done something really important. That child would look for her when they were there in the hallway every time we were passing between classes.
So, did you want to add something to that?
Well, just having that giving teachers that confidence that it's okay, you're not going to say the wrong thing, or you're not going to make it worse. But I also agree with the administrators, because they have to be on board. For teachers to get any type of extra training, the administrators have to be on board. It's a huge issue, because I also look at grief, dealing with it from a divorce perspective. Yes. Because that is a really big issue right now for so many of our kids, and they don't know how to deal with it. And it kind of goes back to, you end up being the single parent, trying to do everything, trying to be mom, dad, friend, counselor, nurse, all of it. And so I think that, putting that piece in there as well, grieving in a divorce situation.
What I'll add about the divorce situation is, because both parents are still alive and the child hopes, wishes that situation would change, it's a different kind of anxiety altogether, and it's a pretty hard problem to support.
Moving forward, Michael, with this work and with education, and what words of advice would you give to the mom when they're trying to take them to school, and is it the right place for them, and what should they look for their kids? Do you have some advice on that?
They should look for what the child tells them they need.
Okay.
Because it's
right.
Right. It is not the same for every child, for every family. I've had parents call up and they're just freaked out because of what's going to happen with the child's grades and that kind of thing. And I would ask them, what's more important, the grades that they get this term or their well-being?
You said that to me.
Oh, I did.
Yeah, you know what you said to me? You said, Tracy, I've dealt with this for a very long time, and his academics is only a small piece. It's an important piece, but it's only a small piece of his whole being.
That's right.
And you need to make sure that you see that. It's not the end all.
Right.
He is having a hard time in school right now. It's just part of the process. Do you remember that?
I do.
Their mental health is just as important as their grades. And we look, we see that on paper, but how is it affecting them mentally just to be able to get those grades when maybe they should be spending their energy, dealing with some of the other issues and processing that? Just a thought.
And we haven't talked about grief as a mental health need specifically, but I'm glad you said that, because it does show up, because the symptoms that a child is having in school will get the child sent to the counselor's office.
Speak about that some more, definitely.
We'll get the child sent to the nurse's office. There'll be psychosomatic things that'll happen. They may have stomach aches, headaches, or those kinds of things. And then the staff will be sometimes not very convinced of the need of the child, because they realize that they're not really sick, but they have these symptoms. And so they may overlook it, when in fact what they really would be best served to do would be to just find a way to give that child a way to escape that until things kind of settle down and let them come back into the classroom. So it is a mental health need, but not in the same sense that, like, I have a condition like schizophrenia or something like that. It's just my psycho-emotional wellness right now is really out of kilter, and I need a space where I can get things back together.
Well, I have the next subject, which is a hard subject in the schools, and it's bullying. And, when you have a child that's already hurting, like Elijah, he had so many kids tease him, and, let's be honest, we were probably not the easiest people to be around out of this thing. And I'm sure he wasn't easy to be around either in the schools, but, he was teased a lot that he didn't have a dad. That pierced him.
And that surprises a lot of people too, because children are little narcissistic beings by their nature, right? That's why we have to train them in the way, and just really self-absorbed, and everything, the world revolves around them, right? Egocentric.
Really,
that's by their nature. That's just part of the process of developing. But a lot of parents are surprised to find that maybe their child's best friend will say something really mean to them after a parent dies. And the thing is, the children are afraid of what's happening with your child.
Yes.
Children are afraid of what's happening with your child, because the scariest thing that can happen to a child is to lose a parent. And this child has had it happen to them. It's like cooties, man. I don't want your cooties close to me. Literally. And it's not anything to worry about too badly, except just manage it and don't let manage things properly and teach children what's appropriate and deal with it as you need to. But the fact is, other children will not surround your child and throw their arms around them and say, oh, I'm just going to be thinking about you every day and praying for you every day and hoping that your little broken heart heals after your dad died. Yeah. They're going to be like, stay away from me, you're weird.
Yeah, because they are.
And it's really, really hard.
I mean, because they are struggling.
Everything in the world has changed. That's right.
And don't you think sometimes if they're around it, they might think that might help them to them too? It's almost,
of course,
it's almost just
of course it
hard
is
to be around.
Yeah, that's absolutely it.
So if you are a family that knows a kid that has lost a parent, what advice would you give to your own kids to support, say, their friend at school?
Be willing to continue to play with them and do the things that they normally would do before this happened, so that the child will have some sense of normal. Yeah, there is still, my life is not gone. A big part of it is gone, but my whole life is not gone.
I'm still here.
I'm still here.
They're still the same person they were before.
Right. Exactly. And the people around me that are important to me and the things that they mean to me, they're still here too.
Can you speak to the moms out there that are raising these kids? There's 11 million widows out there just in this country and 19 million fatherless kids. Mm-hmm. And you're going to be in a segment here real soon with Elijah, and he's going to have some questions for you and words of wisdom that you and I have spoke about preparing for this. Mm-hmm. Who would a mom go to, say their kid's struggling in school? Who do you recommend that they go and speak to about their kid, and what solutions are out there for them? Are there any at this point?
Well, it kind of depends on what comes up.
Kind of when the kids are struggling in school, and who is the advocate? Is it you?
Well,
is it a combination?
I would begin by being the advocate for the child at school, because sometimes a well-placed and well-timed conversation with a teacher can change their perspective on the need. And if they know, from your perspective what's going on, they're more likely to deal with it better, and that gives them accountability too, because now that they know that this parent is really on top of things, and most teachers really want to help. They just don't feel like sometimes that they can.
Exactly.
And
we're just not equipped and don't want to make it worse.
Right. So I would start with just understanding that I'm going to have to be my child's advocate. I mean, and I've had parents call my office when I was at Judy's house, private practice, Philippi, wherever, and just ask questions. And I will, because we have this background and this experience with the schools, we'd give them some recommendations about who to talk to, ask who they've been interacting with, who is in a position to maybe advocate a change or make a change that needs to change or something like that.
Okay. Well, you are in for a treat. Thank you for being here, Shelly and Michael. We are in for a treat. Elijah's Words of Wisdom with Michael is coming up next.
All right, so I heard earlier that you have some words of wisdom for kids out there.
I do have some words of wisdom. As soon as I was asked to give words of wisdom, the first thing that popped into my mind was draw near. And this has kind of been a theme in my life for, I don't know, maybe a year or so. Just a lot of occasions, things come up with people who are believers, and they worry about this or that, and they're confronted by all kinds of stressors. And it's what God keeps saying to me, draw near, because it's what he said to me. And what that means is many things. It's not just drawing near to God, which is most important, but also draw near to the people that are in your life that care about you. Because at some point, any child that's going through the aftermath of the loss of a parent is going to be tempted to pull away and to go back into a shell, and try to isolate themselves. And isolation is one of the probably biggest problems, I think, that children can have, because when you isolate yourself, there's nothing nurturing you, and you may get cut off from your friends because your friends don't understand. You may feel like even kids at church don't understand, or that kind of thing. And so the people that you have available to draw near to them, and never give up on that, because they're more important to you than you may realize at the time.
That's great. So, I have a favor to ask. Could you pray over the widows and the fatherless for us?
I'll be glad to.
Thank you.
Father, you love the widows and the fatherless, and you've instructed us in your word to take care of them. And I just thank you for Tracy and Elijah and for what you've laid on their hearts to never forget them. And I pray that this will just cause us to be more compassionate and just look forward to, where is there somebody that maybe is a widow or some child that may not have a father, that maybe I can just encourage them by letting them know that they're not forgotten. And in Christ's name, I pray that you would just provide everything that they need in great abundance, Lord. And just help people to have open hands to supply those needs, no matter what they are. And we ask these things in Christ's name. Amen.
Thank you so very much for being on the show, and I know
My pleasure.
that there are a lot of people out there that really meant a lot to them. So thank you.
My pleasure.
We all want to be caring people who give to others in their time of need, when they are most vulnerable. In order to do that, you need a personal, heartfelt way to reach out to someone when they lose a loved one. The problem is you don't know how to comfort her, your friend who has just lost her husband, a child who has just lost their daddy, and a little girl who's just lost her Gigi. They're happily ever after gone. As a believer, you know they are in a better place, but when you see your friends, your heart breaks. You feel powerless to help. At Elijah's Path to Healing, we understand their pain. We understand it because we lived through it. We also understand your frustration at not knowing what to say to them, what to do for them. We remember the days when our friends struggled too. This is why we created Surrounded by Love, a sweet blanket that they can wrap themselves in when the pain overwhelms them, because we know it will. A simple, beautiful gesture that reminds them that they are not alone and they are surrounded by love.
I want you to picture the day you get the call that either your husband or spouse has died. Or imagine you are a 6-year-old kid like Elijah and one of the 2 most important people in life are no longer here. Everything changes in that moment. According to the Census Bureau, there are over 11 million widows and 19.1 million fatherless children just in this country. Research shows these families face poverty, obesity, bullying, abuse, and neglect, just to name a few. I truly believe God is asking you to unite with us around James 1:27 and help the widows and the fatherless, as Elijah and I travel in a fifth wheel around this country, partnering with faith-based equine-assisted facilitators, broadcasting our program, setting up communities to support and help these families back to life. No gift is too small. We cannot do this alone. It takes money to be able to do what we do. Thank you in advance. Sponsor a widow or fatherless child with our blanket outreach program. Become a monthly partner. Give a one-time gift. You can either text to give, go online, or make checks payable to Elijah's Path to Healing Foundation at the address below. Thank you, and God bless.